This podcast is brought to you by TeamTrade, a digital solution that helps you hire, optimize, and retain employees. Using psychometric assessments to identify more than 100 professional mindset traits, it gives instant reports you can use to build high-performing teams. Get 2 free profiles today, no commitment, no credit card required, at teamtrait.com. TeamTrait.com. Welcome to the Manage Smarter podcast with hosts C. Lee Smith and Audrey Strong. We're glad you're here for discussions on new ways to manage smarter, hire, develop, and retain talent, improve results, and propel team performance to new heights. This is the Manage Smarter podcast.
Lee, there's been an explosion, according to today's guest, of fear-based leaders. And she's got some statistics I read in the foreword of her book that will blow your mind. And even worse, some leaders think that being a fear-based leader is quite fashionable and trendy right now, she says.
Yeah, and whether it's on the political stage or in the corporate stage, or in any part of the world, right, yeah, we are seeing people mistaking leverage for fear, and that's not certainly how we advise people to manage. But here's the thing: is like when you hear this topic, we all immediately have a story that comes to mind of a fear-based leader. And mine was actually very early in my career. And, when this guy had something he wanted to talk to you about, he would have like a little memo pad where he would just write the words, "See me," and then, put his initial down at the bottom. And so, and then you go and you schedule the time to see them or whatever. And it was always, later in the afternoon or the next day or something like that. And of course, in the whole time, I mean, you're nervous. All right. You're getting a little fearful about, okay, what is it that this person wants to see me about? Can we kind of get a little detail to prepare for this meeting? And eventually, when I announced my resignation, it's like I just asked him, it's like, why in the world do you do this? Because I absolutely hate it. And he said, it's because this gives you time to think about all the possible things that you might have done wrong that I need to talk to you about. And I'm like, you gotta be freaking kidding me. But anyway, so that was my experience, and I'm sure we've all got them.
So on that note, welcome to Manage Smarter, everyone. My name is Audrey Strong. I'm the Senior Vice President of Communications here at Sales Fuel.
And I'm C. Lee Smith. I'm the CEO and founder of Sales Fuel, and I started the company partly because of that person.
Well, there you go. And Kate Lowry is here today. She probably has a thing or two to say about that. She developed her methodology growing up in a personal hierarchical family. She is a CEO, coach, venture capitalist, and author based in Silicon Valley and an expert in fear-based leaders. She refined her approach in the elite worlds of startups. She calls them, what did you call it, Kate? Sharp elbow industries. I like that. Private equity, management consulting, and big tech at McKinsey, Meta, and Insight Partners. Her book called Unbreakable, run out and get it today. How to thrive under fear-based leaders. And in her free time, she writes comedy and music and has a service dog named Annie. Kate, thanks for coming.
Thank you guys so much for having me.
All right. So I know, Lee, you want me to ask, well, what made you write the book beyond all your clients telling you horror stories all day? Did something happen to you personally?
Well, I think a lot of things have happened to me personally with fear-based leaders. So I've had 7 or 8 fear-based bosses in my career, which definitely makes you think twice. But really, it was the sea change that I saw in our culture. We are seeing a major shift in how people choose to lead, probably the biggest shift I've seen in the last 15 or 20 years. And it is a very distinctive and unpleasant leadership style that says, might makes right. It's my way or the highway. Get in line or get out. My most recent experience at Insight Partners very much felt like that to me. I had multiple fear-based bosses who were incredibly difficult. And then my coaching clients were coming to me and totally spinning out. around January of in 2025, people were really freaked out because all of a sudden their investors were being extractive. Their CEOs were trying to dominate and control them, and we just started seeing this rush of permissible bad behaviors that we had not seen before. And so that really prompted me to write the book, because a lot of people think, oh, there's nothing you can do. If I'm being targeted by someone who's a big bad bully, I just have to take it or leave. And that's not true. There's, 30 different levers that you can pull to preserve your own agency and autonomy in the face of people like this.
And just the
Yeah,
statistically I referred to, and then you can, 30%
yeah, no,
of
I
the
want to hear this.
leaders, 30% of the leaders Kate encountered 20 years ago were fear-based. In the last few years, she says in the book, newly out, by the way, 80% now.
Dang.
Yep.
Yeah, that's right. And, some of them aren't fear-based at heart, but they're seeing everyone else doing it. And they're going, oh man, I have to posture strength and control too. I'm going to double down. And oof, it is not a good trend.
So what happened like in the last decade when it was all in vogue basically to show vulnerability, and it was all about culture and all those types of things. So what happened between last decade and today do you think that has led to this development?
Yeah, well, for sure. We were in this like, let's treat employees well, Google's gonna give everyone perks type of culture, and now we're very distinctly not. And part of that is, response to media. You look at the most popular TV shows, you see Game of Thrones, House of Cards, Billions, they all have fear-based leaders at the top. But then you also look to the different cultural role models that we have. We're seeing a lot of bad boy billionaires who are saying, I'm going to fire half of this company, I'm going to turn it around. We're seeing political figures who are saying, I'm going to take over because anything I say goes, right? And then in other parts of culture too, we're seeing this drift towards rigidity. And in leadership, just like any other industry, there are things that go in and out of style, just like the bottom jeans. And the pendulum has majorly swung in the other direction. And most people do not know how to deal with that.
It used to be that, when you had to let people go, it was a sign of weakness in the company, right? That's, oh, the company must be shrinking. The company must not be doing well. And now it's actually a sign of strength. It's like, oh, the company is operating much more efficiently and getting us a higher return on investment because they're able to do the same or do more with fewer resources. And that's one of the things that I've seen certainly in the last 5 years that while inherently may not be related to a fear-based leader, it certainly incites fear, though, in the workforce because, they know that they could be next.
Yeah, well, at their core, fear-based leaders are very deeply insecure leaders. And insecure leaders feel like they have to constantly prove themselves. So I have seen a huge number, especially in the tech sector, of performative layoffs where they'll lay off 10% of the company and then immediately hire 8% back. But they don't publicize that they're hiring the 8% back.
Man.
Or that they're redistributing them. It's more like, hey, I'm going to let you go. I'm going to give you severance and then just hire you back into a different part of the company 3 or 4 months later. And it almost feels like an arms race quality. Like, my company's going to be the leanest. My company's going to be the most efficient. But it also has to deal with this almost Darwinian survival of the fittest type of strategy where people are saying like, I only want the most strong, anyone who's weak could get out. But in reality, most companies may have some performers who are stronger than other performers. But do you really have to cull 20% of the herd every year? I don't typically think so.
So working our way down the power pyramid, one of the things, the next level down, because we're managed smarter, would be the middle management. And you said in a different interview, all right, let's say you're a middle manager listening to this podcast. You have a horrible fear-based leader above you. You should put yourself between that person and your team. Don't bring your team to meetings with the leader and be the buffer in between. And you explained why. There's some horrible things that go on if you reveal things to the fear-based leader about the people you're managing.
Yes, definitely. So if you're a middle manager and you're stuck in this situation, you essentially need to be the umbrella. Sometimes I call this like being the crap umbrella. You have to let all of the crap from above hit your umbrella, but don't let it hit the people below you that you're sheltering kind of from the storm. Because at the end of the day, fear-based leaders are highly disruptive to work. They're very counter to innovation. And what will protect you and your team most is being a high-performing team. And being a high-performing team means you can't let their work constantly be interrupted by a rogue leader.
Mm-hmm.
So does that fear-based leadership also lead to fear of making mistakes, for example? And because you had mentioned innovation and everything like that, and you've got to be willing then to try new things and to make mistakes and like that. But if you have that fear going around you, I can't imagine that being good for innovation.
Yeah, fear-based leaders are completely antithetical to innovation because when you lead with fear and your goal is to keep the people below you both destabilized and afraid, it causes what's called amygdala hijacking. And amygdala hijacking means that it essentially turns the sections of your brain responsible for strategy and creativity completely off. So they're not going to get the best ideas from their teams if their team is really, really stressed and really, really scared. And they often end up with huge levels of different types of tech debt and other issues that really serve as Achilles' heels later, because no one is feeling confident enough to say, oh, hey, I see a big problem here. This could be a really bad thing, because these types of leaders tend to shoot the messenger. And no one is feeling like they can throw out their biggest, best, craziest ideas that, could help the company succeed, because typically leaders like this say, only my ideas matter. I'm the creative genius here. You do what I say, jump when I say jump. But the reality is, if you have a 1,000-person organization and only a CEO is allowed to have ideas, you're never going to get the best work out of that org.
Plus, it's exhausting for the CEO. Just exhausting.
Well, they shoot first and then they don't even ask the questions later. That's just what they do. You say that they're very childlike in their wiring, and that you have a plethora of tips for self-protection and techniques, and that you suggest, that some of which are so basic, they're brilliant, because you have to almost think about dealing with a 2-year-old toddler. One of them is like, you could just play dumb if they're criticizing, where's this, whatever. Let's start talking about some of the solutions.
Yeah, definitely. So there are a lot of ways you can protect yourself. The first way is to make sure you never tell them what you actually care about. People like this will try to take away or target the things that are important to you so that they can manipulate you and cause big reactions. So the next thing is...
example of that.
That's the carrot on a string.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it can be very simple. You should never say to them, "Oh, I'm really looking forward to going to my kid's Little League game this weekend," because they'll make you work through it. Similarly, you should never say, "Wow, I'm so excited about the new design project. I think it's going to make our website so much better," because you can bet that they'll cut the funding to that. Because what they're trying to do is cause big reactions and try to make you afraid. Because if you're afraid, you're on defense, and they can be on offense. And if you're on defense, you're easier to control. So even if they do things where, they come along and try to kick you, I always tell people, try to pretend to be like a gray rock. You are an inert part of the landscape. If someone kicks a rock, nothing happens to the rock. It's actually very boring to kick. So you want to be boring for them to kick so that they move on to someone else. And to the point of them acting like 2-year-olds, in my book, I have a chart that helps you gauge the emotional age of the person that you're working with. But if you have someone who is, emotionally a 2-year-old, you need to give them lots of breaks in meetings. You need to have snacks with you. You need to be prepared to distract them if they get upset about something. Because although their body may look like an adult, their emotional age just really isn't capable of functioning at a mature level. So you can't treat them like a rational actor. You have to really manage them like you have a toddler on your hands.
So let's say you've hired this high performer and you brought them in from the outside, but you start to see things that are not going as well as you had hoped. What are the everyday behaviors that quietly would signal then to a CEO, someone in the C-suite, that someone they've hired, a leader that they've hired, is eventually going to have a retention problem?
Yeah, so what's interesting about leaders like this is that they show a very different face to the people above them than to the people below. And they're often very strong salespeople at first on the surface. So they're very good at getting hired. But then once they're in the ecosystem, you'll see signs of people poisoning the well. That means that you may see their direct reports trying to go around them to you to tell you that something is wrong. You may see people taking more sick days. You may see performance on the team going down. And there may be issues with retention, either client retention or employee retention. And the fear-based leader, if they're in your C-suite, will make excuses about that. They'll say, oh, I just can't find good people to work anymore. People don't know how to work these days. Or like, oh, that client just didn't understand our value anyway. And so on. But if you kind of put an ear to the ground, there will be signs. And I would encourage leaders to make sure that they have forums to hear from the people below them. So if you have a chief of staff, make sure that your chief of staff is regularly talking to entry-level team members and checking on their happiness. Make sure that you have pulse surveys that are anonymous that go to you and not just that C-suite that's overseeing them, and so on.
There's got to be a fear of retribution there, though, too. And because it's like on these employee surveys, it's like even though they're anonymous, a lot of people don't believe that they're actually anonymous. So are you really getting the honest feedback that you really need then to deal with somebody like this?
You know, there will be signs, right? I think when you have to kind of look at things in aggregate. If you see someone who's been very loyal to the company who decides to leave, if you see people who are having a high rate of transfers to try to go to different teams, if you're seeing that one team is getting lower NPS scores than another team, if you're seeing that there is a there are more interactions than you might expect, where people who don't normally come to talk to you are now trying to reach you. Those are kind of signs to a CEO. And so you see us surveys, can be helpful, cannot be helpful. But when you look at things in aggregate, you will be able to kind of find it. And I recommend tasking people who are seen as gatekeepers to do some research for you, whether that's having your executive assistant go down and talk to people on the floor, just chatting with them and seeing how they're doing, whether that's, trying to have your chief of staff be part of some water cooler talk. Really, it's up to you to make sure that people are happy. But most commonly, I find these types of leaders at the very tops of orgs. They tend to be the investor. They tend to be the CEO, because to an extent, if they have someone above them, they're somewhat limited in what they can do. And oftentimes they will try to get very strong results and then ride the results to continue being an asshole.
I love it.
Mm-hmm. You say that okay, it's one thing to blow up somebody's little league game and not care about that. That's a horrible person. But there's so many more levels of horribleness that I'm sure you've heard from your clients. And so you suggest that you take an internal self-check and everybody set up your hard red lines. I will not participate in blackmail. I will not do this if I'm asked to do that. I'm out. I quit. Like, what are some of the red lines that you suggest to your clients?
And how do you communicate those? Add onto that.
When it's happening, is that when
you don't communicate those? Those are just for you. Okay. So I recommend that everyone know what their red lines are in advance. And if different people have different risk tolerances, so it'll be different by person. But it could be, I will not do anything illegal. If someone asks me to commit fraud or embezzle or blackmail, I'm not going to do that. It might be, I will not publicly shame others. If I am forced to humiliate other people in the workplace, then that's it for me. I'm leaving. When I was working at McKinsey, I had red lines where I would not serve weapons manufacturers, big tobacco, or some other industries that I considered very harmful. And so the important thing is that you need to know what those lines are as soon as you realize you're dealing with a fear-based leader, because they're going to test every boundary. And they don't think that the rules apply to them. So they will drag you into breaking many rules, whether that's using more money than is in a budget, whether that's using company funds for things that are not company related, whether that's, doing a Sam Bankman-Fried, borrowing money from one company into another. The thing is, they're so deeply arrogant, they think the rules don't apply and I will never, ever get caught. And you don't want to be mixed up in that if you can help it. And I usually tell people, if you have a fear-based leader, the best thing you can do is leave, right? If you can find some place where there isn't a fear-based leader, that is always preferable. And then you don't have to learn the tools in my book. The reason I wrote the book is that things are getting so pervasive that I was having conversations with friends in Silicon Valley, and they were going, "Oh, I just left a company that was toxic, and now I'm a different company that's toxic in a different way." And so it's created this from the frying pan into the fire situation. And that's when you have to start learning new skills to protect yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Your consultancy, you focus a lot on mission-based companies and also underrepresented founders. So is this bad behavior or whatever? Is this more pervasive with these underrepresented founders, minorities, immigrants, that sort of thing than it is for everybody else?
Yeah, so I have a lot of experiences navigating the world, doing mission-driven work in healthcare and AI, things like that, and also being underrepresented as someone who's, a gender minority and queer and has disabilities. And so I spend all of my time helping my mission-driven and underrepresented founders get a foot in the door and be protected in the ecosystem. Because fear-based leaders try to stomp on anyone that they see as the weakest. And to them, you're weakest if you're different in any way. And I saw this a lot in my work at Insight Partners, where, if you're underrepresented and you're very competent, you're seen as a threat, people stomp you. If you're underrepresented and you're not competent, then people hate you even more. And so my work with these founders is helping them navigate very hostile ecosystems, whether that's fundraising from highly extractive, growth equity people, dealing with finding, the good pockets of venture, et cetera. Because typically folks that like to dominate others will pick the people they think are easiest to dominate first.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So let me just ask this you point blank. Do you find that fear-based leaders are more likely then to have a prejudice against certain cultures than others?
Oh, definitely. So many fear-based leaders are a product of bro culture. Bro culture doesn't have to be toxic, but it's this idea that a certain type of person should succeed and a certain type of person should not succeed. But to say that, it's only a certain group that does this would not be accurate. I have seen women target other women. I have seen fear-based leaders in families where parents are fear-based against their children. I've seen it in community groups. It's very common to have fear-based leaders in faith organizations who want to control their population and manipulate them. I've seen doctors or lawyers who will be using fear-based tactics to control and cow their patients. And so really this type of behavior happens any place where someone sees a power differential and tries to exploit it.
Well, I was talking about specifically about race and age and things like that. Do you see that being more likely in a fear-based leader than someone who's not?
Yes, I think that is often very true. Because when you have differences in age, when you have differences in race, there is a perceived power differential that says, I see myself as above you, and I'm going to enforce that hierarchy. And so when people find stronger hierarchies or perceive stronger hierarchies, there is a stronger potential for abuse and manipulation.
Well, the website is katelowry.com, Lowry, everybody, and go out and get congrats on the book, Kate. Unbreakable, How to Thrive Under Fear-Based Leaders. And Lee is one of my mentors, Kate, and he has been the biggest proponent of empathy of anybody I have ever worked for. And I have to say that I am more appreciative than ever of that after having spoken to you today. And these are great tips. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you guys both for having me.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please rate and recommend on iTunes, Overcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also get more great information at salesfuel.com.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.